All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another lovely Thursday morning at 8:30 for Sioux Falls Athlete. I am joined today by Patrick Artz, I believe, correct?
Correct.
All right, of the Sioux Falls Crow, and basically wanted to have him on because every day, or I shouldn't say every day, for sure every Wednesday I drive by the Marion Park Road, or Marion Road Park, and I get to see these guys on there, and I thought I would love to have them on sometime. So it's awesome to see that. And like I said, it's something that I'm not super familiar with, so I get to learn a little something today. So Patrick, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's a nice day.
Yeah, super nice day out. I'm finally happy with the idea that it seems like we might not get 12 inches of snow, and so that's
It's been a
that's
tough
awesome.
spring.
So first and foremost, for those that aren't super familiar, well, actually, I'll ask you the normal question. How'd you
Sure.
get started in this rugby world? I mean,
Yeah.
that's obviously not something that a lot of American kids get into. So how did that all start?
It was just kind of a small coincidence when I was in high school.
Have you?
Yeah, sure. A
There
little
we
closer.
go.
All right, good. Yeah, when I was in high school, I was kind of looking for a sport to kind of challenge myself. A friend of mine said, "Hey, we just started a rugby team," and that was 16 years ago. And just junior year of high school, jumped in, tried it out, and just loved the sport. Played it ever since, and now coaching and directing for the state. So,
Sure.
yeah, it's
Where'd you go to high school?
Lincoln High School here in Sioux Falls.
Ooh,
Yeah.
you got two Lincoln people in here right now.
Uh-oh.
Another Patriot over there.
Okay.
So, and then did you play football? Did you play any other sports, or was it
Baseball was my primary sport. I was a big single sport athlete, and so then kind of some unforeseen circumstances with shoulder work, I kind of lost a little momentum in it, and so then I was kind of searching for some different identity with sports, and so then that was when a friend of mine came to me with it, and I said, might as well try.
Sure.
And came out to be just the way you play just kind of really challenged me, and so then I just fell in love with it right away.
And so, in talking with you a little bit beforehand, it seems like you were doing some stuff with Sanford as well.
With it right
And
away.
So, how did you get into all that stuff? And so, in talking with you a little bit beforehand, it seems like
Yeah, with Sanford, I went to school down at the University of South Dakota, got my master's in biomechanics, and so that was a great opportunity for me. So I started working out with Sanford Sports Science as a biomechanist. So I was able to work with different facets of strength and conditioning, concussion protocols, doing a bunch of different testing to make sure that athletes are getting the maximum performance out of their bodies.
sure. That I was going to ask what the heck a biomechanist is. So
Nope, that's okay.
How do you get a degree in that? I guess, or is that not a degree in that? So
I specialized in it, and so
Sure.
it's a master's degree in kinesiology, sports science, and the biomechanics professor down there kind of took me under his wing to be able to work in his 3D laboratory, just take a little bit more interest in it than most other students. And so then when a position opened up here in Sioux Falls, when I graduated, there were two options. I was either going to move to LA on Long Beach or here in Sioux Falls, and so I got both jobs, but I chose here to stay here in Sioux Falls.
yeah, that's it's funny. I got a job offer one time to go to San Diego to teach, and for martial arts, and it was funny because they gave me this job offer. They're like, all right, it's going to be $70,000, and I was like, sweet, that's awesome. And then I got there, and then I'm like, well, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to be able to afford something slightly lower than a crack house. So
Exactly. I know. I did the same thing. They offered me the salary. I looked at the closest two-bedroom apartment, and I was like, well, there's half my salary, so what do I do with the rest? And so
Yeah.
major incentive to stay back here.
yeah, no kidding. Was the shoulder injury part of you think maybe what got you interested in some of that field at all, or no?
Yes. Yeah, my upbringing within athletics, I had a lot of challenges when I was a young kid, and so that's one of the main reasons why I'm going into coaching and athletic directing, because I had a little bit of a troubled past with my athletics, and so I want to make sure to be able to reinforce the ideas that I've experienced
Sure.
and kind of put these onto these kids and just make sure that they're getting the most beneficial outcome out of athletics rather than just focusing strictly on performance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see a lot of that. I assume you're talking mostly about like character and things.
Exactly.
So-
Yeah, I'm trying to develop the kids, not the game. And I mean, the game comes with the kids and stuff, and so that's what I mainly focus on is youth rugby. But we also got men's rugby, which is a great way. Rugby is a really sport based around camaraderie and social abilities, and so if you don't have those, it's really detrimental to how you're going to interact with other teams. And so it definitely helps to have someone that's a leader that can enforce those.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go through some just basics. So if people aren't super familiar with rugby, which I am not, so we'll go through some
Sure.
questions here. So are you league or union?
We are a club, and
Okay.
so there's a couple different unions and leagues locally, and so
Okay.
Sioux Falls, we're all individual clubs. And so, for instance, I coach the high school teams. We're in the Nebraska Union League, and so we play against teams out of Omaha, Lincoln, Sioux City, Council Bluffs, and such. The men's team, they play anyone locally, so they play against teams out of Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, kind of just a little bit of a conglomerate, and then there's normally regional tournaments at the end of each season.
And so my understanding is that like if it's league, it's a slightly different rule set from a union. Is that my understanding, or is that all pretty much the?
In rugby, it's a little more consistent, just because if it's a league, technically you govern yourselves, but with a union, you have a commissioner that can oversee all activities.
Okay.
And so there could be some variances, but we do have a central governing body for rugby that allows us to be able to portray all rules and sets all guidelines. And so as long as you're following those, you can go within it with your own commissioner, but most of the time everyone follows a pretty basic, strict guidelines.
Sure.
Basic, strict doesn't quite conflict with each other, but
Okay. So well, first of all, positions. I mean, obviously it's not going to be the same. Talk me through some of the positions that they have in rugby.
Sure. Typically in rugby, the easiest way to divide it would be two sets. And so you've got the forwards and the backs. The forwards are your bigger guys, the guys that are going to be doing a lot of the pushing and the grunt work. Mm-hmm. And then you got the backs, which are going to be the guys that are a little bit more of the finesse players that pass the ball a lot, run a little bit more. Within the forwards, your two big guys, a lot of the times when you describe a positions, it's how you set up a scrum on the field. A scrum is where you reset the ball, and a lot of people typically see it where there's 9 guys on each team going up against each other and pushing as hard as they can to try and win the ball.
Right.
Well, in there you've got 2 props. Those guys are in the front. Those are the heavy hitters. You got 2 locks, and so those guys are our second row guys. Again, a lot of these names are specific towards their role within the scrum. And so locks, you lock your position. Flankers, they're on the flank, so they come off. And then the guy in the furthest back is the 8-man. And so, and then outside of that, you got your back line. So you got your different sorts of backs: inside center, outside center, wings, and such. So.
And then how many players do you have on each at one time?
Yep, 15 players are on the field at each time. The most popular game that people have been following lately is the Olympic Sevens. And so Sevens is the same concept, just only 7 players on the field at each time. A lot faster pace. You don't see too many bigger forwards playing that game, only because the halves are only 7 minutes long, but it's a lot of running. Sprinting for 7 minutes and tackling is pretty taxing on the body, so it's a lot smaller guys because you have to play on the same size field.
Yeah.
So.
And then that was actually going to be my next question, like the size of the field compared to like a football field, or.
Yep, it's roughly 20 meters longer. So if you were to put the post on the end of the touchdown, that's about how long the field is, and then it's an additional roughly 18 feet wide.
Sure.
So it's just a tad bit bigger than a soccer field.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so watching some of the stuff now in your guys' sport, I've noticed like 2 different versions of rugby where once the player's down, then he has to give the ball to the guy behind him.
Yep.
Now, is that in your guys' version, does the opposing team have to then get back, or can they stay there?
Well, in rugby, there is no play stoppage, so it continually goes.
Right.
And so when a person gets tackled, their job is to go down and set the ball back, but what's formed over the top of the tackle is what's called a ruck.
Okay.
And so the defense is allowed to get into the ruck and try and push you away from the ball. Because if you can push the offensive team beyond the ball, you can pick it up and then it's a turnover. And so that's why, but if you're not in the ruck, yes, you do have to step back so that way it allows the offense to set up their offense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was noticing, like I said, there was almost two versions like that. Is like I saw was okay. As soon as the tackle happens, then they throw it back basically, but they can continue going. So, and then it seems like there's almost kind of two different versions there, or a couple different versions where like there's an Australian rugby as well, which is slightly different.
They're Australian rules rugby. Only in Australia. It's very similar rules, but one of the major things that they change is that there's no offsides line. You'll notice that we instill similar offside rules as soccer, and so anytime there is a ball in play, the offensive team has to be behind the ball. Defensive, it has to be on the opposite side of the ball. Whereas in Australian rules rugby, you're typically going to be playing anywhere on the field, and so then you're able to kick the ball way downfield to your own guy. There's no offsides.
Sure.
Yeah.
By the way, thanks to the gentleman that is watching from his work meeting. Thank you very much. Have it on mute. Okay, so we already talked a little bit about it, but the difference between like a tackle, a ruck, and a maul.
Yes.
But so we've talked a little bit about a tackle, a little bit about a ruck. Talk to me about a maul.
A maul. So this is sometimes when you watch an NFL game, you'll see them use the word scrum, and a rugby player will typically get frustrated because it's actually a maul. Scrum is a way you reset the play. When you see a group of guys get together and start pushing to try and gain ground in the middle of a play, it's called a maul. And so typically if it's out of a line out, which we can talk about later, but the ball gets thrown to an individual, and then your entire team comes in behind them to try and push you against their however many they put in, and you just go as long as you can until the ball becomes stagnant, and then you have to play the ball.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty much just a way for if you're a bigger team to be able to out-strengthen the others by gaining some ground, yeah.
Sure. And then one of the other things I saw, okay, so why does the game sometimes carry on even after one of the teams has made a mistake or committed a foul?
Yep, and so a lot of the times there's advantage. And so if, for instance, someone happens to knock the ball forward unintentionally, it's called a knock-on, but they will allow an advantage to be played so that way the defensive team can pick up the ball and try and advance forward. If they don't get an advantage, then they'll stop the ball and allow them to go back to wherever the knock-on proceeded, yeah.
Sure. I'm so lost at this point.
That's all right.
No.
It's pretty much it allows for the other team the ability to use that penalty against them. And normally it's up to the referee to decide how long they get. But if they don't get the advantage, then they'll just go back to wherever it was.
Sure. And so one more quick question about the kind of the rule sets and stuff. So how does offsides work? We talked a little bit about it, but just go into that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Offsides can happen for both the offense and defense, which is one thing. So, for instance, instead of an offsides, if you're on offense, it's normally going to end up being a forward pass. And so in rugby, every pass has to be backwards. The only time you can advance the ball forwards is off of a kick.
Sure.
And so if you ever are in front of the ball and they pass it to you, it's a penalty, a turnover. The defending team gets the ball. On defense, it's up to the discretion of the referee, but typically whenever you are, for instance, going into a ruck, like we talked about earlier, you have to be behind the ruck, and then once the ball comes out, you're allowed to move forward. If people are moving forward prior to and the sir sees it, he can call an offsides penalty. And then typically on all penalties, the defensive team has to go back 10 meters, so that way it gives the offensive team an advantage.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was
So instead of, like, for instance, if there's a holding penalty in football, they get 10 yards, we get 10 meters to be able to set up a play. Yeah.
Okay. And then so point system.
Yep.
Do you get 5 points for a try?
Yep.
2 points for a conversion?
Correct.
3 points for a drop goal or penalty?
The conversion kick, yep.
Okay.
And so conversion kicks, you're allowed to use tees as well. So the only time you really use drop kicks is if you are actually in the middle of a match and you're allowed to kick it, kind of like how Doug Flutie did back in the day when he did a drop kick from the shotgun. That's what you can do in football or in rugby at any time to try and get 3 points. Or if there's a penalty, you can do a conversion kick off of a tee from wherever the penalty was.
Okay. What am I missing here in all of this? Is there any big stuff, or did we cover most
I mean,
of
we
it?
covered the scrum, the maul. A lot of the times, typically, the only other time that the ball can stop is if it's ran out of bounds. And so instead of out of bounds, it's called the touch line. And typically when that happens, it's a line out. And it's kind of the way, instead of a scrum to reset play, it's how we reset play within the game from the touch line. And so what happens is you get two teams lined up together with a little bit of space in between, and then you have one person throwing the ball down the alley, which is the space in between, and then your job is to lift your individual player up to grab the ball and then throw it back to your team. So
Okay.
yeah,
I've seen that before.
yeah, and I think that's the majority of the major aspects to the game. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so we got all that covered now. Talk to me a little bit about rugby in Sioux Falls. I think the Crows started in, what was it, 91?
91, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they started
So
in
that
91.
was quite a while
Just
ago.
about,
So
30 years ago,
yeah.
just about. So yeah, they've been around quite a bit. Gene Nelson, he is a co-coach with me on the high school team. Him and a group of guys pretty much saw it. His story that he tells me is that he saw it on TV one time and all of a sudden just instantly said, "I'm going to play that." He only saw a short clip of a few seconds and he said, "I have to learn." And so he actually went out and got a Rugby for Dummies book and read it. And so then a group of guys just said, "Hey, let's learn how to play this sport." And so they just started playing and just started the sport in this area. They have been out at Marion Park for a long, long time. And yeah, they kind of just started from there. The high school team started. This would be the 20th year that the high school team's been intact now. And so yeah, it's been around for a long time.
Sure. So, and talk to me, it seems like there's a couple different teams depending on, so like the Sioux Falls Crow, and then talk to me some about some of the other teams.
Yeah, the Sioux Falls Crow's been around since then. The Sioux Falls high school team got established 20 years ago, so that's been the high school boys. That's been the predominantly youth rugby that's been around. Jim Anderson, probably known as Corch, he started rugby out here for the high school teams, and he coached it for 18 and a half, 19 years. And so I just took over 2 years ago, and we wouldn't have a high school program if it wasn't for him. So that was really great to have him. And so we've just finished up our spring season, and but right now we also have a women's team, the Sioux Falls Phantom. And so they've been around for a few years. They've been doing really well with numbers. They've been getting out there and getting some good matches in. We also have some collegiate sectors around here. So SDSU and USD both have a men's and women's rugby team, as well as Augie and USF. They both combine to form a women's team. And so, yeah, there's actually quite a bit of rugby in the region. Just it's got to get out there.
Sure. And then where, like for traveling and things like that, where do you guys normally go for matches?
Yeah, well, with the high school, we are in the Nebraska Union, so we typically host half the matches and then we travel between Sioux City and Omaha. With Sioux Falls, they kind of similar as well. Sioux City is a major rival that they have. They also are looking at trying to get some matches against teams such as Omaha, Mason City, Storm Lake, Iowa, and places of that sort. Mankato, they also normally play 1 or 2 matches with them each year. And during the summer is Summer Sevens, so they normally like to travel a little bit more. For instance, Lakefront Sevens out in Milwaukee. I just registered the high school team. We're going to Milwaukee in June and Denver in July. So there's a lot of great large market tournaments in the Midwest area to kind of give these guys a little bit better of a feel than just the small market in Sioux Falls.
Sure. How's the funding? I know for the schools, obviously, maybe funded by the schools, but how do the funding go for some of that? Or maybe it's not. So.
No, we're the high school rugby is strictly a one-man show, and that's me. It's one of those where, I mean, I'm doing as much as I can on a daily basis to make sure that these kids are able to experience the sport to the fullest extent with minimal cost. And so I'm trying to keep it off of them. And no, it's pretty much just me going out, doing fundraising, doing sponsorships. I have to definitely give a good recommendation to Sanford Orthopedic Sports Medicine. They're definitely a major sponsor of mine. They do a lot of help with us, especially with medical services. Their athletic trainers are amazing. They come out and help us out at every match. Sioux Falls, I know I'm not exactly sure who the Crow do have currently for representation. I do know that Beal Industries, the Beal Distributing, they've helped us out for a long time, and so I definitely give them a recommendation as well. So, I mean, yeah, it's strictly a community support process, and that's kind of where I came in, just kind of definitely allowing more, because these trips to Milwaukee and Denver never were a possibility 5 years ago just because we didn't really have the community support. So I'm trying to get out there, get a little bit more awareness, and get a little more people saying, oh, this is an opportunity for kids and even our men to go out and do something to represent Sioux Falls. 20 years ago, the Sioux Falls men's team was actually quite skilled. They were very good, and so they went to nationals. And when I first moved away to play competitive rugby, you'd go someplace and you'd be like, oh, I'm from Sioux Falls, played rugby there. It's like, oh, yeah, we know some people from Sioux Falls, all this and this. It's pretty crazy how you can go to Denver and Texas and people know Sioux Falls rugby.
Yeah, no, that's I had no idea about that, so that's awesome. Where did you play competitively at?
I moved out to Denver out of high school. Played for a team out there called the Glendale Raptors. Really, really popular D1 program out there. Very highly recommended. It's amazing when you get into areas such as Denver and the Colorado area. They were kind of the start of the rugby community, and so now it's definitely spreading. You got California; they're now becoming a perennial powerhouse for rugby. They're hosting a lot of things. For instance, in this summer, we are actually hosting the World Cup for sevens, and so the entire world is going to be coming here to watch the sevens tournament to be able to win the World Cup. That's an amazing thing out in San Francisco. And but other than that, they have about 6 varsity rugby programs out there that offer full scholarships, sponsored everything through Cal, UC Davis, and all those different opportunities out there to where they're becoming a big powerhouse. And then East Coast as well.
Awesome. Let me pull up some pictures here. We'll have Mr. Robel pull up some pictures. So it's going to be under the pictures tab there, Senor. Got it. Okay. So talk to me about some of the. Why did my camera die out? Oh, boo. Oh, well.
Yep, so, there's Andrew Pashong was the guy there. There's Matthew Olson going into another tackle. Not exactly who the blue jerseys were. There's Dustin Evans. He's the current captain of the Mankato Marauders, but he was definitely an epitome or a milestone for rugby in South Dakota. He was here for quite some time. Jobson, he was a high school rugby player. Definitely has played here for quite some time. So, I mean, he definitely made an impact. Oh, it is the other team is the SDSU Jackrabbits.
Oh.
Yep. And so it looks like there's some players. The SDSU's had a strong program for a while. There's Mr. Pashong again. I'm not quite sure who that is. That's another picture coming up. The one thing with rugby, there's Phil Carmody. He is a Sanford Wellness employee out there off of T. Ellis. Really good athlete.
So this must be when they're...
That is a line out.
Okay.
And so that is when the ball got ran into touch, and so they're trying to reset the ball. There's a good old... It's funny, you'll actually think about nicknames. A lot of the times you'll... that guy's name is Hammer that's running the ball right now. For about 10 years, I never knew his real name. And every single time I saw him, I always just call him Hammer.
All right. So, yeah. Had a chance to look at some of those, obviously, on Facebook, and wanted to pull some of them up. So, how does somebody get started in, say, okay, I want to give rugby a try in Sioux Falls, South Dakota? How does that happen?
Yeah, Sioux Falls, I mean, it's one of those where rugby is such a open and inclusive sport to where I just had my final spring match last night with the high school kids, and I had one kid that's never even touched a rugby ball before, but I was able to instruct him on how to do things within an hour and say, hey, do you want to go out and try and learn how to play? And he said yes. And it's one of those where be willing. All you got to do is just come out, be willing to learn, take some positive criticism. If you do want to play, we actually are moving fields. I'm not sure if you knew or not, but they're actually tearing up Marion Park June 1st.
I did not.
Yes, actually. Marion Park will not be there. They're redoing all the sewage underneath there, so we are being relocated for the summer, and the city is actually building us a brand new rugby field complex out at the Sanford Sports Complex over behind the field house.
Sure.
And so it's going to be a nice brand new regulation size rugby pitch. And by the way, a lot of people call them pitch instead of field. And so that's another terminology. But and so Dakota United, which is the youth rugby movement, we do have a website, dakotaunited.com. I normally post as much information on there as possible. And so typically practices are Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think the men's team practices on Wednesday evenings as well. If you ever just randomly think, hey, I might try it, come out. There's plenty of guys out there that normally just say, hey, we'll take you under our wing, teach you a few things. Nice thing is you'll always at least make a few friends if you don't get, I mean, that's the best part about it. Typically the men's guys They always go out and have a few beers afterwards, relax, socialize. And so the high school group, same thing. Not same thing. So yeah, exactly. We normally go out and we'd like to have a few socials every year just so that way the kids can get together, spend some quality time together, bond, and stuff like that. The women's team, they normally practice 1 day a week as well. I think that's normally on Wednesdays. But all of them normally do have Facebook pages, and the Sioux Falls Crow does have a web page as well. Mike Clark, he is the captain of the current Crow team. Always reach out to him. He's definitely a good one. Brittany Salisbury and Kelsey Pace are for the Sioux Falls Phantom. That's the women's team. All welcoming groups of people. So, I mean, it's definitely something easy to get involved in. And we take a popular motto with rugby is we take all shapes and sizes. We'll find a use for you. Some people think, oh, well, I'm not big enough. Hey, we'll find a spot for you, because the nice thing is, like I told you earlier, there's forwards and backs. Not everyone's a forward, not everyone's a back. So if you're a smaller guy, smaller lady, smaller youth, we'll find a good use for you. And if you're a bigger person, great too. We'll find a spot for you. So we don't turn anyone down. We like to teach the sport to anyone.
Sure. I'm just lost on the fact that now I'm probably going to have to find a different way to get home because of the so do you know what they're doing with that? Are they like turning that into housing, or are they just
it's going to be a new park.
Oh, okay.
But they do want it more of a family-friendly park, and so they're going to put in they showed me all the plans. They're putting in a big old track with a new playground in the area. I think it's actually going to stay a pretty wide open patch of grass. They just don't want rugby there. They just want to have it more family-friendly, less scheduling and stuff like that. So
yeah, I feel like you guys just got that stone that was put up there like 2 or 3 years ago.
I know. I met with the city and talked to them, and they've been very great with helping us during the transition. But that was one of the main things. I was like, well, you guys got to help us move that rock.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and it seems like a ton of stuff is going in over by the field house. I mean, now they have obviously the football and hockey,
junior football, iceplex, and then they got the Huther tennis area, and then they got the field house, Pentagon, and now I just recently saw that they put up all the other land for sale as well, and then they're also possibly thinking of putting that high school up right over there.
Oh, wow.
And so they're actually thinking about putting up that 5th high school for the Sioux Falls public school system. So the expansion out there right now, when I first heard about it, I was like, that's kind of in the middle of nowhere. I liked how ours was integrated within the community, houses all around, trees. People like playing there. Go out there, it's a little windier, so it's a little bit harsher conditions. But when I see the plans that they have for the area, it's kind of nice to see that the development's going to go out there. It's only going to help with our exposure. It's going to help out with awareness of the programs out there, because it's going to be a rugby-specific field. It's not a transitional field where football can play on it and lacrosse or anything like that. No, it's specifically rugby, which is very nice for us.
Yeah. And then some of the concerns that people might have, obviously, sometimes it looks like a super harsh sport. Is that something that you...
Yeah. No, that's something that I definitely tried to fight, that stigma. And so it's one of those where there is contact. I'm never going to say there's not contact in rugby, but it's statistically that we've actually seen provided within like World Rugby rules is that we actually are a less prone to injury than other sports, other similar sports, football and soccer. And so the reason being is we don't have so much of a high impact collisions. It's much more... I have a lot of wrestlers on my team, and so I love that because there's a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of close contact, just wrestling to the ground, body positioning and stuff like that. And so it's one of those where I try to say you're going to be as aggressive as you would like. I'm not going to force you to go into and tackle some big guy, and if you do, I will teach you how to be able to tackle appropriately. And so it's something I normally tell a lot of people is the NFL has actually started implementing rugby tackling into their defensive tactics. And so the Seattle Seahawks were the first ones to do this. They actually hired a full-time tackling assistant out of New Zealand who was a professional coach for rugby. His job literally was just to go in and teach how to tackle appropriately to their NFL players, because we emphasize our head position majorly. If we go over tackling every single day in practice just to make sure that the kids are using the appropriate form, the appropriate body positioning to make sure that their head is out of the way of the runner, because we obviously want to protect our kids as much as possible, and especially their heads. And so concussions have been down, which is great. I mean, I just got done with my spring season, and luckily I've only had one kid that didn't get a concussion, but I did sit him 1 week just for a concussion protocol. And so, I mean, he just got hit a little bit hard, but other than that, we've been very lucky, and statistics have proven we're actually not too harsh of a sport, just aggressive.
Sure. Yeah, and that I'm sure that helps. That obviously your background, being able to kind of call some of that stuff as well, I suppose doesn't hurt as well. So
exactly, yeah. The fact that I like being able to go out onto the field and identify it, because my background allows me to be able to at least assist in the diagnostic process towards concussion protocols. So. And I've had kids come up to me like, I'm fine. No, you're not. Get off the field. I don't want you to even possibly risk it, because I'd rather have you play for the rest of your life than worry about finishing out one match. It's like, so safety is a big key with me with my kids. And so I definitely want to make sure that they're operating safely as well as playing hard. So
yeah, for sure. Well, kind of wrapping up here, first and foremost, also didn't bring this up very much. I got to get way better at this. Team Health, thank you guys very much always for your support and sponsoring the show. Like I said, without you guys, it wouldn't be possible. Also, Science Nutrition, Joel was on last week, so if you guys get a chance, definitely check him. Yeah, for sure. Definitely check both places out. If you need any heating, plumbing, all that stuff, go to How. And then
was that How Heating Plumbing?
Yeah,
awesome.
So
well, thank you very much, How.
Yeah, they've done a very good job of supporting athletes in the area, and then also this show. So
good. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Anything else that they should know about rugby in Sioux Falls or Sioux Falls Crow, or any of the other facets of that? So
yeah, try it out, guys. Keep an open mind. Just if all it's going to hurt is just come out and practice once. A lot of the kids that just or men that start, typically you can only practice a few times, but play one match. You'll learn 100 times more, and not to mention you'll have a good time. So, I mean, if you ever need anything, DakotaUnited.com, SiouxFallsRugby.com, and if not, Facebook pages, Sioux Falls Phantom, Sioux Falls Crow, Dakota United Rugby Club. Yeah, and both genders. Youth sports this fall is going to be our first middle school camp, and so that's actually going to be sponsored by the city. So anyone from 5th through 8th grade, you guys are more than welcome to come out, boys and girls. That's going to be coming up here in September. So.
Awesome. Yeah. And then if they were to watch it on television, I guess might you be able to watch it on television?
Yeah. What's funny is the college rugby championships are coming up here the first weekend in June. I think it's 2nd and 3rd. It's actually going to be on ESPN2, ESPN3, and ESPN Plus. They're getting a lot more network coverage, which is very nice. And so those are going to be on all weekend. You're going to see a lot of powerhouse colleges going on there. Those are great. And then there's other avenues, like NBC Sports normally has quite a bit of collegiate and international options as well. Internet, YouTube is always a great option. I mean, that's where I started watching. But as it comes on, my ESPN app is pretty much my reliance upon watching some international rugby. So ESPN's been a great coverage for us. So yeah, this first weekend in June, try and watch the College Rugby Sevens Championships, and it'll be some good rugby.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Go ahead and hit me with that outro there, sir. And see you guys later.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. Thanks.